The good news that I share with you today is that God is faithful. God is faithful. Therefore, our prayers today will be for the grace not to give up no matter the challenges that we face. Now, the first line from our second reading today says this, that faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. This, in short, says that faith is the living of the reality of something not present as if it is present. Living the reality of something not present as if it is present. This, my friends, you can all testify with me, is something difficult for our contemporary mind to grasp. It's difficult for people of our time to live the reality of something not seen as if it is present. This is because we are infested with a spirit of pragmatism, needing to touch, needing to feel, needing to smell, needing to punch the button and know what the result could be. Equally, we are already living in a society where we are used to authorities and institutions who don't keep their words, even though they will tell you, read my lips. So we are used to all these things. However, because we are used to these things, when we talk about faith and when we talk about reliving the reality of something as if present, when it is not present, it sounds like a mirage. However, as Christians, we are still encouraged to the practice of faith. Faith is still encouraged as a virtue and a way to live. Why? Because we know that our God is a God who keeps his words. Our God is not deceptive. Consequently, we are encouraged never to give up, no matter the challenges that we face. And in the midst of these challenges that we may face, to see every opportunity we can have to grow our faith holdings and not to pursue earthly glamour. Why? Because last week we were already told that vanity of vanity, all things are vanity, so that we don't spend our life in vanity. Now, as an example, our first and our second readings today, think about celebrating the faith Abraham had in God who kept his promises. In celebrating this faith, we're helped to reflect what the journey was like for Abraham. This will enable us to appreciate when we call him our father in faith, and so encourage us equally to know how to live this call to faith. We remember that he was called to leave his fatherland, all of the Chaldeans, to a land spacious that God was going to show him. He responded in the affirmative and moved. Yet we know that for many years he remained a wanderer in the desert. Again, he was promised that the number of his descendants will be so large that cannot be counted, just like the sand by the seashore or the stars by night cannot be counted. Yet we know equally that for many, many years he remained childless, that even unto his old age, that was when he had even the first child from the slave wife, and furthermore into old age had a child from his real wife, even who we are told was past the age of bearing children. Even though he was being told to go, this land is spacious. Even though he was also in the process told about the challenges he was going to face. even to the extent of his descendants being held as, subject to a community for over 400 years. You can imagine that he was not listening, he may not have been listening to this, but he will be, consumed by the thought of a large, spacious land, where he won't have to deal with castle rustling in his own native land, where he may not need to bother about drought, where he may not need to bother himself with fighting for space. Remember, that was how he was able to separate with Lot and told Lot, go this way, I go this way, so that we don't need to struggle. So this could be in his mind, and he did not even hear those little challenges. But through all the challenges he faced, like when his wife was taken away from him, when he was plotted to be killed because his wife was so beautiful. And to the extent now, next time, all he did was to warn, oh, it's my sister, so that he will not be killed. Or even when he was challenged, would kill his son, Isaac, the child of his old age, and the rest of them. In spite of all these challenges, wandering, childless, even to the killing of the child, he never contemplated going back to the Ur of the Chaldeans. Why? Was he stupid? Was he a moron? I think he never contemplated because he believed in this God as a faithful God, that God will provide, that God will fulfill his promises, because he knows God is not man. That's why we say, because he's not man, his promise shall surely come to pass. He will never ever lie. That is God. He's not going to lie. So he kept there. And so when his descendants, as our reading today, the first reading talks about this, the Passover, the children of Israel now celebrate the Passover as the inauguration of that promises being brought to fulfillment. Them now moving into the promised land, the land promised to their fathers, and God overcoming the enemies who betrayed, maltreated them and enslaved them for many years. They celebrated. And that was the celebration that the book of wisdom was trying to allow to us in our first reading. Now, like Abraham, you and I, we are also called on the day of our baptism to begin our pilgrimage from our native land to a land that God is pointing to us. And that land, of course, we know is heaven. In this new pilgrimage, we are promised so many things. And so we are called in that promise to believe in God and follow the path of God. We are called in that promise to reject Satan and his promises. Christ, even going further, told us about the challenges that is going to face us as Christians. The world, if they hate you, they hated me first, because the servant cannot be more than his master. He alerted us. They will drive you from one town to the other, one city to another. A time will come when one who is killing you thinks he's doing a patriotic duty. All these things were said. And in the midst of all these things, he was still making a promise. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, and I go to prepare. And when I prepare, I'll come and take you, so that where I am, you also may be. He also told us in the midst of the challenges that he who perseveres will be richly blessed. But what is the story? Unlike Abraham, you and I have continued to look back. Abraham did not look back to the Ur of the Chaldeans. Neither did he contemplate going back. But you and I continue to look back to our old ways of life. We continue to look back to the things we reject. We continue to look back to the ways we reject. Why? Is it because we think that Christ is not going to keep his promises? Do we think that Jesus Christ is a liar and that God is not true? Sometimes we find challenges of life too hard to our minds to endure. And so, like the servants in that gospel parable, we continue to seek occult advantages in order to better our earthly lot. Those servants thinking, oh, my master is not going to come. And they began to cheat. They began to defraud. They began to eat and drink and make merry. They were not being accountable. So we continue to seek occult advantages to better our earthly lives. Now, do we do so because we think God does not see that we are doing something occult? Do we do so because we do think God does not see to know that we are looking back and we are abandoning the way we are supposed to be going? Or do we do so because we think we're in control of our lives, that we can do it, better our earthly moment now, and when the need arises, we can turn back at our own discretion, at our own choosing? Do we think God does not see? Do we think that we are in control of our lives? Today, my friends, the church tells us that God is faithful and his promises are sure because it's not man. Therefore, we are encouraged to hold strong on our faith. Hold strong to your faith and let nothing take your mind away from the hope you have. Don't let anything take your mind away from it. Because that hope is what becomes like a gasoline, a gas to fuel your life. Going ahead, knowing that there is a reality, there is truth in what you hope for. We are also to pray for strength, not to seek occult compensatory ways for earthly pleasure. Why? Because we are not in control of our lives. That's the essence of our gospel reading today that talks about being ready, being attentive, being watchful, because we do not know the time or the hour of the master's coming. We do not know the time or the hour of our death. We do not know the time and hour of our being called to give an account of what we are told to do. Because in life, we are only caretakers of what God has entrusted into our hand. So we need to pray for strength, not to allow the challenges we face to make us seek occult compensatory ways, to begin to follow the path of vanity, because we are not in control of our lives. There is one thing I learned in philosophy, and it says that once one is born, he or she is old enough to die. And we are all witnesses to that. And when people die, how people die. Some people die on just breathing the first air. Some people die in the womb. Some people die a year old. Some people die 10-year old. Some people live up to 100. People die of all ranges. So what does that mean? Every day is a grace, and every moment is a borrowed time which we can use to grow our faith holdings, pursuing the reality of that thing we hope for. Every day is a grace, and every moment is an opportunity that we have been given, a borrowed time, not to waste our lives in vanity, but a waste to spend it in growing our faith holdings. My friends, God is real. His promises are real. Yes, the challenges are there, but let us imitate Abraham, our father in faith, never to look back, never to think of going back. The Bible tells us stories of people who look back. Remember the Lord's wife. Remember the people in the pilgrimage to the promised land who began to think about the cucumbers and they said, let us go back. You remember everything that happened to them. Now we have followed this path to believe in God and follow the way of God. That's our pilgrimage, because it will lead us to the heaven that is promised us. Let us not look back, and let us not seek occult compensatory ways in trying to better our earthly Lord. Otherwise, we do so spending our lives in vanity, and all they can yield for us is vanity. And may God save us from spending our lives for the sake of vanity. Let us invest our lives for the kingdom, and let us use every moment to prepare ourselves for the kingdom. Amen.